I stumbled upon this article the other day and I really wanted to take a closer look at that. So, the article in question is Swiss population has negative view of Trump. Obviously, I think the whole world has a negative view of Trump. The majority of Swiss respondents painted a negative picture of US President Donald Trump, according to a survey. Women were even more critical of him than men. Some 87% of the women surveyed described Trump as a bad or rather bad politician, according to a survey published in the media newspapers on Friday. The US president was also not well received by men. 76% of respondents thought he was bad or rather bad. According to the results, his advisor and tech billionaire Elon Musk fared even worse. Yeah, I don't even really know what to say to this, because I think Elon Musk just doesn't really make sense in a lot of things, or he's very um hypocritical, let's say, in a way, saying, oh, we need freedom of speech, so X has basically zero regulations on what you can say on there. But on the other hand, it's there was something recently where he basically said to limit the freedom of speech of certain people, which is obviously doesn't align with that belief. Depending on their party affiliation, participants responded differently to the question of whether Trump would contribute to world peace. Compared to other parties, more voters from the right-wing Swiss People's Party stated that Trump would be more likely to help resolve wars. However, according to the analysis, the majority of People's Party voters also agreed with the basic stance. The majority of respondents, regardless of their party affiliation, believe that Trump's second term in office will lead to more conflicts and wars. I see what people mean. I see why people are concerned, because basically they expect him to mess up, and I understand where that comes from, because basically, especially here in Switzerland, all of these kind of changes that people want, we have a direct democracy, so everybody gets to vote on everything, more or less. And then you have Trump in comparison, who basically just does things, he decides things and acts on this wherever he can, and he basically doesn't really have a barrier. There are some things where people tell him, no, you can't fucking do that, but a lot of times he can. And I understand where people have a problem with this, because it's very chaotic, it's very messy, it's very unpredictable, you don't know what's to come. Here in Switzerland, things are very slow, but also very predictable because of that. Because you start with an initiative, you get people to vote on this, you can more or less also predict how people are actually going to vote on things. And then when you have something that's been accepted by the public, it's being implemented over a period of time, over several years usually. So it's always very steady, it's always very predictable, it's always very slow change. Whereas Trump, and personally this is where I kind of like what he does, he just does things. And yes, it brings chaos because it's a change, but change isn't a bad thing. I think sometimes in this country we tend to forget that change isn't always bad. The attitude towards Trump's trade policy was also on the list of questions, as a graphic shows. The answers varied according to age group. Respondents aged 65 and over most often agreed with the statement that US trade policy will lead to less prosperity in the US and worldwide. In the 18 to 34 age group, 54% of respondents agreed with this. I'm not so entirely sure about that. I'm by no means an economics professional. I don't really understand that topic too well, to be honest. But tariffs and taxes and stuff like this, I feel like it does have the potential to raise quality over quantity. So if you have higher taxes, a company, in my opinion, would have to be really determined to still ship things to America. So if they are determined, then I assume that they sell a product that is actually of good quality, that they think people are willing to buy. So I don't know. So that's that. And I think One thing that I wanted to point out was this one as well, and it says poll suggests Donald Trump has many fans in Switzerland, which is an older article. I think it's from 2024. So around a quarter of Swiss citizens would vote for Donald Trump if they had the chance, according to a recent poll. This percentage is higher than in many other European countries. Now, that was a worldwide study, as far as I understand. An online survey published on Monday found that 61% of Swiss people would support the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. A quarter would vote for Republican Donald Trump. In Western Europe, only the United Kingdom and Greece showed greater support for Trump, 27% and 33% respectively. Alright, the global survey of 41,000 adults in 43 countries was conducted in October by Gallup. I mean, you can compare this as well. This is 41,000, the other one was 35. So it's already a much smaller sample group of people who have been surveyed, and I think it depends where in Switzerland and which people actually fucking voted on this. So is this very representative? I don't know, but I thought it was interesting that it's still like a quarter. It's still nothing, you know, like it's still not enough. If Swiss people were to vote on If Swiss people were to vote on this, Kamala Harris would have won. In Denmark, however, only 4% of citizens would vote for Trump, compared with 7% in Finland and Norway, 11%. In the Netherlands, 13% in Germany and France, 16% in Austria, and 18% in Italy. I can completely see why Denmark, Finland, Norway, they are far more social states, let's say, than Switzerland is. Switzerland is kind of a weird mix of like a social and capitalist country. So there's a lot of things that should be like on the more social side that are regulated through a capitalist way. That's not something that happens in Denmark or Finland or Norway. There it's actually like government regulated stuff, as it should be, and there's probably a lot less friction in those countries, and it essentially boils down to like healthcare, childcare, like all of the social government services more or less, and people over there are happier because it's easier, because it's understandable, because everybody profits from it in the same way, but it's spread out more fairly, more evenly than it is even here in Switzerland. To contrast, support for Trump is high in Eastern Europe. In Serbia, Hungary, and Bulgaria, almost half of those questioned would vote for the former US president. Half. That's a lot. Not surprised there as well. Those are countries that are struggling and they actually want to see change, and that's the problem. I can absolutely see Serbia, Hungary, Bulgaria supporting his approach to things, because those are countries that need change, desperately need change, because it's not going well inside their own countries. So if they had somebody like Trump, who is actually, you know, maybe a little too loud and maybe a little wrong here and there, but he actually does something, I can absolutely see why those countries would welcome that. Gallup also asked whether the image of the United States in the world would improve or deteriorate with Trump. In general, only 19% of those questioned thought it would improve with Trump. On this question, the Swiss were more critical of the Republican candidate. 16% said that the image of the US would be more positive if he is elected, while 59% expected it to worsen. So Switzerland may be voting for Trump, but they don't have a lot of faith in the US, or the image of the US at least. I don't expect people to have a good opinion of America. I just don't. Because I think in the end we all care the most about our own country and about the image of our own country. So if you ask people from other countries whether or not Trump will improve the image of the United States, it's probably going to be a no. It's probably going to be a no for Kamala Harris as well. It's probably going to be, it was a no for Barack Obama, I think, as well, and for Biden. It doesn't matter which president is going to do it globally. The US is probably not going to have a fantastic image, period, because people care about their own countries and where they live. It doesn't really matter either. I think the more interesting question is whether or not there will be more peace in the world in general, which there's always going to be chaos, there's always going to be wars, there's always going to be something. But I think this article would be interesting in that regard. Without the United States, Switzerland would no longer be Switzerland. Oh, sorry, it's Donald Trump. So that's one of his speeches, one of his many long speeches from the World Economic Forum. In his lengthy speech at the Davos Economic Forum, the American president asserted that Switzerland would no longer be Switzerland without the United States. He also justified the tariff on Switzerland products and criticized former President Karin Keller-Sutter's aggressive attitude. This diatribe did not prevent President Guy Parmelin from describing his discussion with Trump that evening as courteous but firm. I mean, yeah, I don't expect Swiss politicians to be courteous but firm. You gotta understand one thing, Swiss people are extremely polite. They are not very outspoken. They would rather not say their opinions. Switzerland is a wonderful place with extremely brilliant people, Donald Trump declared in his speech at the WEF. But according to him, the country benefits greatly from the American market. They arrive, they sell their watches, no custom duties, they go home and they earn 41 billion in the process. He stated before a meeting with Swiss government ministers Kai Parmelin, Karin Keller-Sutter, and Ignacio Cassis. I could have imposed 70% taxes on Switzerland, but the country would certainly be destroyed in that case, so I'm not going to do that, said Trump. You know, that's not how taxes work, right? I think he's got a point. We benefit a lot from not paying customs or taxes or whatever on those products that we bring to America. But at the same time, you gotta understand that if there are taxes, these products are gonna be more expensive in your country. That's how prices work. If a company gets taxes, they usually calculate it into the price. Like, where do you expect that money to come from? It's basically your people paying that, and the company is paying that back to you eventually. So if you impose 70% taxes, the products are probably going to be about 70% more expensive as well. You already have a problem that people cannot afford basic things like food. I mean, you know what? Why not? Because those are luxury items essentially that we bring into the country, in my opinion. Watches and chocolate and cheese. Well, maybe not the cheese. If you want to impose more taxes on that, why not? It's going to be the rich people that can afford these things that are going to buy this, and they are going to pay for that one way or another, even if the price is 70% more now. Is this going to destroy our country, destroy Switzerland and our economy? I really don't think so. America is not the only country that we trade with, that we sell things to. China and generally Asian countries are also a big market for us, so you're not the only motherfucker buying our shit. Negotiations under pressure. The American president recounted the negotiations of recent months with Bern, making a sarcastic remark about former Swiss President Karin Keller-Sutter. The Prime Minister, a woman, told me, "No, you can't tax us, we're a small country." I just imagine Keller-Sutter actually being there. No, you can't do that. Like, it does seem like something that might have happened. We're a small country. Yeah, you know what? Yes, we're a small country. We're surprisingly a lot of influence in the world. I initially wanted to tax Switzerland at 30%, but then I decided to raise the tariffs to 39%, the Republican stated, adding that Karin Keller-Sutter had been particularly aggressive. Trump's response was direct. You're a small country, certainly, but you're a big country. Again, that's what I was saying as well. We surprisingly have a lot of influence. We have a lot of products, a lot of quality products. At least we like to tell that to ourselves. But the Swiss made label does make a difference. Negotiations are still ongoing. The American president broadened his remarks. There are many countries that are what they are because of us, he declared. He went further regarding Switzerland. Without the United States, it's no longer Switzerland, he asserted. Donald Trump, however, nuanced his approach. I don't want to hurt people, so we're going to bring taxes down to a lower level. It's a very bold statement. And, in a way, he's right. He's not completely wrong. In historical sense, would Switzerland still be Switzerland if America and Russia, for that matter, didn't stop Nazi Germany in World War II? I don't know, probably not. In today's terms, does America make us Switzerland? I don't think so. Again, you're not the only market. You're not the only country or the only people that are interested in our products, so it's a very bold statement. But I think a lot of statements of Trump are like this. It's manipulative. It's a little bit of a gamble. I think the tariff stuff is also, like, I'll put it really high so then we discuss and then we can lower. He could have said, oh, we're gonna do a 5% tax, and you know what, Switzerland would have complained about that as well. If he says we're gonna do 30 or even 39%, then we can lower it. I don't think he's necessarily wrong for doing this. I don't know if it's the best approach necessarily. He is a businessman after all, not actually a politician. And I kind of find his approach a little more refreshing in this case, because it's not always like this endless discussion about what to do and how to change things. He's like, oh, I've got the military under control so I can send them to Venezuela. Oh, I want taxes on certain countries so I can do this now, and then afterwards I'm gonna discuss with them and find like a middle ground where both of us are kind of happy. In this sense, I actually kind of support what Trump does. Like, it's always been my issue with the Swiss way, that everything is so slow and change just takes forever. My general approach in life is essentially change is a constant, change is inevitable, and it's chaotic and messy. You can't always predict what happens next. You can't always make the right choices necessarily, and sometimes you have to do something and then fix it afterwards. And the thing about the world as well, or life in general, you're always going to have an issue. You're always going to have a problem to solve. There's always going to be some sort of friction somewhere. So I don't expect Trump to solve this and bring world peace. I don't expect anyone to do this. There's always going to be something. But we can slowly make our way towards that if we do something about this. And I want to add at this point, I'm not trying to make any excuses for him, for his shitty behavior, him shit-talking other people and other countries in order to make America look nice. But I do think it's also important to highlight the positives that he brings. Everybody has something that they are able to bring to the table, and I think that is something that he's able to bring to the table as a businessman, actually taking action and doing something. And I think that's something that a lot of presidents have been missing in the past, that they talk a lot but they don't really do much. And it's not even just America. I think it's a global issue that politicians are just like blah blah blah, but nothing ever really happens, nothing ever really changes, especially not for the people that voted for these politicians in the first place, in hopes that they will finally change something and do something good for them. Anyway, leave a like, subscribe, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I would really love to hear your opinion, and I'll see you next time.